So here we are in Liverpool. My name is Malik Al-Nasser, formerly Mark Watson. My father, Reginald Watson, came to Liverpool from Demerara in British Guyana as a merchant seaman in the 1930s, and he spent his whole time during World War II serving first as a merchant seaman and then as a Royal Navy seaman from 1942 fighting the Nazis. So my history in the city goes back quite far, but what I didn't realise when I started my research into my family history in Demerara was just how far back it actually did go. It was only with the discovery of the world's first black footballer, Andrew Watson, whose photograph looks remarkably similar to myself, and who comes from the same part of Demerara where my father comes from, that I started to embark upon a journey to find Andrew Watson and to find my own historical Guyanese past, that I discovered that my roots to Liverpool go way, way beyond my father's arrival here in 1935. It all starts on a sugar plantation in Demerara in the 1800s, and prior to that in Grenada in the 1790s. That was the foundation of the slave concern which became known as Sandbach Tinny, and from whom myself and Andrew Watson, the world's first black footballer, actually descend. This is an area in Liverpool where slaves were sold in the marketplace, and directly behind it you'll see Liverpool Town Hall. And one of the biggest merchants in the slave trade in the 19th century was a gentleman called Samuel Sandbach. The significance of Samuel Sandbach was not just that he was the Lord Mayor of Liverpool, which was, after the Prime Minister at that time, was the principal most important position that you could hold in this country, because Liverpool, of course, was the mercantile capital of Britain at that time. But what was more significant was the fact that Samuel Sandbach was a prolific slave trader, and he is the namesake of a famous Liverpool company that hasn't been talked about a lot up until now, but I'm about to blow the lid on it, and they are the people who owned my ancestors during slavery, and that company was called the Sandbach Tinny Company. Slavery was at the heart of the British Empire, and Liverpool was the epicenter of slavery. So these slave monuments here, that Britons will never be slaves, is quite ironic, really, the fact that my people were actually sold as slaves in this very square by people who sat in this very town hall here. So Samuel Sandbach, as well as owning the Sandbach Tinny Company and the slave concerns in the plantations where my family hail from in Demerara in South America, was also the Lord Mayor of Liverpool. He was at the seat of political power in this country. His near relative was William Ewart Gladstone, who presided over the slavery compensation scheme. And Sandbach Tinny was one of the biggest single recipients of compensation for the loss of their slaves. The slaves, of course, were not compensated at all. And to give you an idea of the power of these guys, you only need to just turn to this building here. This is the Martins Bank building. Now, the Martins Bank building was built in 1935. However, it was built with the proceeds of the slave trade, because the Martins Bank was originally from London in the 15th century. It's a very, very old bank. It was right at the beginning of slavery. Martins was involved in the slave trade. But in 1834, they combined with another bank, which was founded by William Brown of William Brown Street, which many people in Liverpool will know as the place of Wellington's Column and the old museum and the William Brown Street Library. But William Brown was also partnered with one of the very early shareholders of the bank, who was also Samuel Sandbach. And the Bank of Liverpool in 1834 merged with Martins Bank from London, both built entirely on the slave trade. And in 1935, their combined efforts built this magnificent building here, the Martins Bank building, totally and entirely on the proceeds of slavery. Now, why is that relevant today, you might ask? Well, in 1969, the whole of that operation was subsumed by Barclays Bank, And until 2007, Barclays traded in that exact precise building. So as you can see, the chain of liability in terms of the slave trade, in terms of reparations, which is what many of the Caribbean countries are now seeking from Britain and other colonial powers, is very evident, because it's not a matter that this was something years ago that nobody had anything to do with. Barclays Bank wouldn't exist as it does today were it not for Martin's Bank, were it not for the Bank of Liverpool, were it not for the enslavement of my ancestors in this very city. And it started here, and from this place it spread throughout the whole world. So in 1834, just after they were one of the biggest recipients of slavery compensation, Sandbach Tinney, along with William Brown of William Brown Street and others, formed at number 7 Water Street the Bank of Liverpool. So this is not the original building. The original building was knocked down, and this building replaced it. But ultimately this is the site of the original Bank of Liverpool, and they continued trading on this site until they combined with Martin's Bank, and then they became part of the Bank of Liverpool Martin's Bank Limited, which, if you look on the other side of the street here, is this superb, fantastic building here that was completed in 1935, all on the proceeds of slavery. As you can see, on the entranceway of Martin's Bank here, they've got the images of the young slaves that they took from West Africa. And above it, they've got King Neptune. And above that, they've got the cricket, which was the symbol of Martin's Bank, the slave operation that they ran from the 15th century right up until it became Barclays Bank. As you can see, this company here, the British and Foreign Marine Insurance Company Limited, is the building where all of Sandbach Tinney's insurance operations were registered, including that of Caledonia Insurance. Caledonia Insurance was founded by, among others, Charles Stewart Parker, and it would underwrite slave cargoes. It would also underwrite the proceeds of that slave trade in terms of the rum and the molasses and the sugar and the cotton and the coffee that came back in from the plantations. And shipping insurance in those days, when ships were going down quite regularly, was quite a big deal. These guys were taking massive premiums to underwrite the risk for the ships crossing the Atlantic, and were making huge proceeds as a result of that. So it was another dimension of the business. What's interesting about Caledonia Insurance is that it was subsumed by Guardian Assurance, which was then subsumed by AXA Assurance. So as you can see, companies that were started and founded on the slave trade still exist to this day.